I was very isolated as a woman artist, and I turned to the past. The more I studied, the more I realized that even though women achieved, those achievements would be erased the next decade, the next generation. I wanted to challenge that process, to end that process, to honor those achievements, and to introduce them into the society through a work of art that would symbolize our heritage so that those achievements could never be erased from history again.
Judy Chicago put feminist art on the map. Born in 1939 in Chicago, she attended the Art Institute of Chicago and the University of California, Los Angeles. Much of her early work was minimalist, and she was included in such landmark exhibitions such as Primary Structures in 1966 at the Jewish Museum in New York. But it was really her turn in the late 1960s towards understanding how we might feminize not only art practices, but the way that we practice in general, that really marked Judy's importance in the art world, not just then, but also now. She helped develop the first feminist art program in 1970 at California State University in Fresno. And then with Marian Shapiro, she co-founded the feminist art program at the California Institute of Arts. And out of that came the famous Woman House, that 1972 installation that the two artists created that transformed an abandoned building into a house that was representative of women's experiences. And through that, she came to do works like the iconic Dinner Party, an immense installation that through place settings designated for 39 important women also recognized the contribution of hundreds more. It's a monumental installation that's now on permanent view at the Brooklyn Museum. In the late 1960s, she started to ask the question of how we might feminize the landscape. And she started making a series of ephemeral atmospheres, smoke sculptures which used colored smoke and fireworks in the desert and the landscapes of the American West to, as she said, soften that macho land art scene that she was experiencing at the time. She wanted to create works that had the softest impact on the land, the lightest touch. They weren't about moving earth. They weren't about creating giant monuments. They were about creating moments which enabled us to see the land differently. She made a number of atmospheres between 1968 and 1974, and they're only now beginning to be understood for their importance, not only in the genre of what we might call land and environmental art, but also in the genre as an expansion of what we understand as the genre of minimalism. She returned to her atmospheres beginning in 2012. Since then, her atmospheres have become more complex, looked even deeper into various sites. They've taken place on bridges, outside of museums, and now, for the first time, on the water. For Toronto, in June of 2022, she'll be creating her first atmosphere in Canada and her first for the water. Her palette of colored smoke was specifically chosen to represent the hues of what's now called Lake Ontario, and it will be filled with rich blues and greens. The first edition of the Toronto Biennial of Art was centered on the shoreline and the Great Lake. And the next edition, which opens in March of 2022, will move up the various tributaries. So as we move up the shoreline, we're thinking about how water is itself a methodology. It's a means of moving with and through what first might have seemed impenetrable. We're thinking about how water finds its way through the tiniest of cracks. Water is fugitive, it doesn't abide by borders and boundaries. And in this vein of elemental disruptions, we feel that Judy Chicago's atmospheres, in a way, follow this idea of what it might mean to disrupt, what it might mean to be fugitive, what it might mean to speak back. It also asks how land and water are inherently feminine, how the plumes of colored smoke will alter our experiences of the waterfront. In 2019, we asked ourselves, and we asked the artists that we worked with, the question, what does it mean to be in relation? We were responding to the climate crisis and an attendant increasing need to understand kinship, what it means to be in relation. And in 2022, this idea of relationality continues to be a guiding principle for us and the artists that we're working with. And we look forward to all of you joining us in June to experience Judy's new work for Toronto.